My name is Caleb Marsh. I'm 34 years old. Last Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., I sat at my kitchen table in a second-floor apartment on Delaney Street in Portland, Oregon, and I pressed play on the first of 23 voicemails that had arrived on my phone between the hours of 8 p.m. and midnight. 23. Not one of them was from a number I recognized. They were from 6 different phones, 4 different area codes, 2 voices I hadn't heard in 5 years, 1 voice I'd never heard before. Every single one said some version of the same 3 words. Before I tell you what those words were, I need to take you back to where this started, because the voicemails are not the story. The story is what made silence the only answer I had left. Before I get into what happened that night, and I will get into every single second of it, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if this story is landing somewhere real for you. Drop the city you're listening from in the comments. I want to know where you are tonight. I read every one. Let me take you back to winter, 2017. Harlan Falls, Ohio. Population 6,200. The kind of place where the high school football coach's name is on the side of the water tower and nobody thinks that's strange. I was 28 years old and I had driven 4 hours in a rental car on Christmas Eve to be there. Because that's what you did. That's what the Marsh family did. You drove through ice warnings and ate your mother's dry ham, and you sat at the table and you were grateful. You were always, always grateful. The house on Welliver Road smelled like pine cleaner and something burnt underneath it. My mother, Diane Marsh, had been cooking since 6 a.m. She would tell you that approximately. 4 more times before dinner, there were 11 people at that table. I'll tell you now, so you understand the full picture. My father, Dennis Marsh, sat at the head. My older brother, Todd Marsh, sat to his right with his wife Kristen and their 2 kids. My aunt Carol Whitfield was there with her boyfriend whose name no one used. My grandmother, Edith Marsh, sat at the far end and talked about the cold. And then there was me, the youngest, the one who had moved away, the one who had, according to the family narrative, ideas above his station. I was sitting at the corner of the table, the chair that wobbled. No one ever fixed that chair. I had, at that point, spent 2 years building a small logistics consulting practice in Portland. It wasn't glamorous. I had 4 clients and a spare bedroom for an office. But I was building something. I was paying my rent. I was 28 and I was building... My mother ladled gravy and mentioned, without looking up, that Todd's company had just promoted him to regional director. Everyone responded. The table came alive. I waited. Then I said, I signed a new client last week, a mid-sized freight company out of Seattle. It could be significant. My mother set the ladle down. My father looked at his plate. My brother Todd smiled the way Todd always smiled, warm from the front, calculating from the back, and said, That's great, Caleb, and when does that start actually paying? There was a small sound of laughter from the far end of the table. Not loud, just enough. I looked at my grandmother. She was looking at the window. I looked at my Aunt Carol. She was refilling her glass. I looked at Kristen, Todd's wife, who at least had the decency to look down at her food. Nobody said anything. The chair wobbled. I put my fork down and steadied it, and I thought, I have been at this table my whole life, and that chair has never been fixed, and no one has ever noticed, and I am the only one who has noticed, and I am so tired. That was not the inciting incident. That was just Tuesday. The inciting incident came after dinner. My father had been drinking since noon. Not dramatically. He never did it dramatically. 3 bourbons spread over 6 hours, slow and quiet, just enough to loosen what he usually kept managed. We were in the living room and my mother brought out the Christmas envelopes. This was the tradition. Every adult got a card. Inside each card was a check, always the same amount, which I will not name because the amount is not the point. The point is the ritual. I opened mine, looked at it, said thank you. Then I said, and I want to be precise here because I have replayed this sentence approximately 1,000 times. Hey, can I ask you both something just about the property, about what you're planning long term? My parents owned a rental property on Castor Avenue, a duplex bought in 1991. I was not asking for it. I was not asking for money. I was asking, at 28 years old, as the son of 2 people who were then both 62, whether there was a plan. My father looked at my mother. My mother tilted her head. She has a very specific head tilt. It means, watch what I do with this. Caleb, she said very softly, we just gave you your Christmas gift, and now you want to talk about our property? The room shifted. I said, that's not what I meant. She said, still soft, I just think it's something, don't you? After everything we do. Todd was in the doorway. He said nothing. Kristen was behind him. She said nothing. My grandmother had gone to bed. Carol was in the kitchen. She said nothing. My father poured a fourth bourbon, and my mother sat down in the armchair, the nice one, the one that was hers, and she pressed her lips together, and she looked at the carpet, and she let the silence do its work. What happened next took about 40 minutes, and almost none of it was loud. My mother has a gift. I want to name it plainly so you understand it. She can perform injury so effectively that the person who asked a reasonable question ends up apologizing for being injured themselves. It is a specific skill. It takes years to perfect. She did not yell. She dabbed at the corner of her eye with the back of her index finger, once, just once. And she said, I just didn't expect this, Caleb. Not on Christmas, not after everything, my father said, looking at the wall. You always do this. 3 words. That is the whole machinery. You always do this. Not, what did you do? Not this specific thing. Just, always, just this. An indictment without a charge. I looked at Todd. Todd looked at his phone. I said, I'm going to head out. My mother said, of course you are. I went upstairs, packed my bag, took the rental car key off the hook by the back door. I did not slam the door. I want to be precise about that. I closed it the way you close a door, when you already know you won't be opening it again. I drove 3 miles to a Days Inn on Route 30, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, and I thought about that chair, the one that had always wobbled, the one no one had ever fixed. I pulled out my phone. I typed a message to my mother that said, I need some time. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I did not reach out. Not for 5 years. I want to be honest about what that decision cost before I tell you what it gave. Because anyone who tells you no contact is clean is leaving something out. When I drove back to Portland on December 26, 2017, I had $2,300 in a checking account, a 4-client consulting practice, and a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment on Northeast Glisson Street that cost $140 a month. I had 1 suitcase because I had packed for Christmas, not for exile. There was no emergency contact on my medical forms for 8 months. I left it blank. Every time I filled out a form that asked for a family reference, I wrote a colleague's name. Her name was Priya Acharya. She was 31 and had her own version of a family she didn't return to. We never compared stories directly. We just both understood the forms. My birthday came in February. No call. I waited by my phone at 7 p.m. the way you wait for something you have decided you don't want, and I am still not sure what I felt when it didn't ring. My grandmother, Edith Marsh, died in March 2019. I found out through my cousin's Facebook post 3 days after the funeral. I sat with that for a long time. I still sit with it. There is a particular cost to no contact that no one prepares you for. You become a character in a story you cannot edit. Someone is telling people things about you. Someone is explaining your absence at Thanksgiving, at Easter, at birthday dinners, and the explanation they give is not yours, it is theirs. And it travels, and you cannot correct it. I know this because one of my mother's friends, a woman named Barbara Teal, who I had known since I was 6, sent me a Facebook message in August of 2018 that said, I just want you to know your parents are heartbroken. Whatever happened, I hope you find your way back. I didn't respond, but I read it 11 times. Here is what silence gave me. In August of 2018, 8 months in, I woke up on a Tuesday and the first thing I heard was not a voice. Not my mother's voice reminding me of what I owed. Not my father's quiet condemnation. Not Todd's smiling arithmetic. The first sound was a garbage truck on Northeast Glisson and a bird on the fire escape. And nothing else. And I lay there for 4 minutes doing nothing. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to start a day as the only narrator. That was not a montage moment, it was just a Tuesday, but I remember it the way people remember earthquakes. The first person outside my family who treated me like someone with a future was a man named Gerald Okafor. He ran a small freight brokerage out of a converted warehouse near the Port of Portland on Terminal Avenue. He had come up on the list because his previous consultant had retired, and I cold called him on a Thursday in March 2018 with a pitch I had revised 12 times. He looked at my proposal for 4 minutes and said, "You check your work." I said, "Always. It's how I grew up." He looked up from the paper. He hired me on a 6-month contract. That contract became a 2-year engagement. Gerald Okafor was the first person who ever looked at my compulsiveness about accuracy and saw a professional asset rather than a symptom of anxiety. He never asked about my family. I think he knew not to. If you're still here, thank you. Hit subscribe, because this story is about to get a great deal more complicated. There was no montage. There were alarm clocks and spreadsheets and falling asleep with a cost modeling textbook open on my chest. There were Wednesday nights eating a $4.50 bowl of pho at a place on 82nd Avenue because it was the warmest room I could afford to sit in. There were mornings that felt like progress, and afternoons that felt like treading water, and evenings that were neither. Year 1 of no contact, I stabilized. The consulting practice grew from 4 clients to 9. I moved from Northeast Glisson to a 2-bedroom on Delaney Street, the apartment I'm in now. The extra room became an office with a door. I put a lock on it not because I needed one, but because I could. Year 2, Gerald Okafor introduced me to a woman named Sandra Yee, who ran a mid-size regional carrier out of Tacoma, Washington, and needed a systems overhaul. That project lasted 14 months, and it changed everything. Not dramatically, incrementally. The way things actually change. Sandra Yee was 52 and had spent 30 years building something from almost nothing. She had the specific quality of someone who had been underestimated so long that she'd stopped needing anyone to believe in her. She looked at my work and she said, at the end of the first month, "You think in systems. That's not common. Don't let anyone make it small." I wrote that down. I kept the post-it note. I still have it. Year 3, Priya Acharya and I started meeting for coffee every other Wednesday at a place called Bridgetown Roasters on Mississippi Avenue. We never had the full conversation about our families. We'd get close, and then one of us would redirect to work, and the other would let it happen. But once, just once, she said, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something to be resolved before you're allowed to actually live?" I said yes. She said, "Me too. I think that's the trick they play." We sat with that. The coffee got cold. We went back to work. There is an object I want to tell you about now. I have been carrying it since the night I left Harlan Falls. It is a small wooden box, roughly the size of a hardcover book, that my grandmother Edith gave me when I was 17. It has a brass clasp and her initials, EAM, burned into the lid. She gave it to me and said, "There's a letter in there. You open it when you know who you are." I have moved that box 4 times. I have never opened it. I will tell you now so you understand the full picture. I have known for approximately 2 years what I would find inside. I have chosen, until very recently, not to confirm it, because confirming it would require me to feel something I was not prepared to feel. And surviving for a long time required me to stay slightly numb. Year 4, my practice had 13 clients and 2 contractors working under me. I had filed as an LLC. I had a savings account with money in it. Not a lot, but money. Real money that I had earned in a room that no one had built for me. Year 5, a freight industry publication called Supply Chain Weekly ran a profile of Sandra Yee's transformation of her Tacoma carrier. In the 5th paragraph, she mentioned her consultant by name. My name, with the name of my company, online, indexed, searchable. I didn't see the article for 3 weeks. I found it by accident. By then, apparently, someone else had already found it first. The night I finally opened the box was in October of 2022. I had been sitting at my kitchen table going through a contract amendment, and I noticed the box on the shelf where it always sat, and I thought, I know who I am. I have been that person for a while, and she has been gone for 3 years. I opened the brass clasp. Inside was a letter on pale blue stationery, folded 3 times in my grandmother Edith's handwriting. The ink was faded but legible. She wrote, "Caleb, your mother loves you the best way she knows how, but her best way has always been too small for you. Leave if you have to. Don't come back until it's on your terms, and don't let them make the leaving the story. The story is what you build." I closed the box. I put it back on the shelf. I did not call anyone. I sat very still for a long time, and then I finished reviewing the contract. My mother found the article on a Tuesday in late October 2022. I know the specific mechanism because my cousin Leah Whitfield, the one who had posted the Facebook notice about my grandmother's funeral, sent me an Instagram message 3 months later that said, Just so you know, your mom Googled you. She called my mom crying. I'll tell you what I believe happened in that house on Welliver Road the night my mother read that article. I believe she read my name twice. I believe her first thought was not pride. I believe it was a rapid calculation about narrative. Who else knows this? And how does this change the story she has been telling for 5 years? The first voicemail came on a Friday in November from my brother Todd. His voice was measured, almost corporate. He said there was something going on with Dad, and that the family felt it would be beneficial for everyone if we reconnected. He did not say what was going on with Dad. He did not say he missed me. The second voicemail, 4 days later, was from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named Renee Marsh, Todd's wife, Kristen's sister-in-law, a person I had met exactly once, who said she was reaching out on behalf of the family and that a lot had changed. The third was my father, 2 minutes and 40 seconds of silence, then, "Hey, it's Dad, call me back." That's all. The fourth was my mother, soft voice, careful. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking and that she had found something. She called it something that she thought I deserved to see. She said, "I love you, Caleb. I hope you know that hasn't changed." Then the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, different voices, different levels of urgency, all asking some version of the same thing. They were not saying, "I'm sorry." They were saying, "Come back." Those are different sentences. I listened to every single one, some twice. I sat at my kitchen table on Delaney Street with a glass of water, and I let the voices come through the speaker, and then I put the phone face down and I did not respond. For 3 weeks, I said nothing. Then came Thursday, the 23rd. In January of 2023, the Pacific Northwest Freight DOE Logistics Summit was held at the Hilton Portland downtown on Southwest Broadway. I had been asked to give a 35-minute keynote on operational resilience in regional carrier networks. I had confirmed this booking in September, 4 months before the first voicemail. I will tell you the detail that matters. The summit's guest list was semi-public. Any registered attendee could see the program. My name was in the program, my photo was in the program, my company name was in the program. Todd Marsh, as regional director of a freight management company, was a registered attendee. I did not know this until I was standing in the wings at 9:14 a.m. watching the room fill, and Gerald Okafor, who was there, who had come specifically to watch me, leaned in and said quietly, "There's a man out there who looks an awful lot like your photos of your brother." I looked through the gap in the curtain. Todd was in the 4th row, center. He was sitting very still. He was wearing a navy blazer. He was looking at the stage with the expression of someone doing arithmetic. My mother was 3 seats down from him. I want to be precise about what I felt. Nothing dramatic, a kind of clarifying quiet, like a room after a door closes. I looked at Gerald. He was watching me with the steady look of a man who has seen worse. I said, "I'm fine." He said, "I know." I walked out onto that stage and I gave my keynote. I checked my notes twice before I went on, the way I always do. I spoke about the operational cost of systems built on avoidance rather than transparency. I spoke about what it means to build infrastructure that doesn't collapse under the weight of what it was designed to carry. I used freight networks as my frame. But I'm telling you what I was actually talking about. Near the end, I said this, and I want to give you the exact words. The most expensive mistake in any system is building around a structural weakness instead of through it. The route that avoids the problem is always longer, always. I did not look at the 4th row when I said it. I didn't need to. There was a reception afterward. Gerald stood near me like a person who understood the assignment. Priya was there too. She'd come specifically. She stood on my left. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. My mother found me at 11:23 a.m. by the coffee station. She looked older. That is not a weapon. That is just a fact. 5 years is 5 years, and she looked it. She was wearing a gray blazer and pearl earrings, and her expression was the one I recognized, the one that was prepared. She said, "Caleb, you look wonderful." I said, "Thank you." She said, "We need to talk. Your father." I said, "I know about Dad." Todd's message was clear. She started to say something else. "I will tell you what I noticed." She glanced very briefly at the people around us. She was managing the room before she'd finished the sentence. Todd appeared at her shoulder. He said, "Hey, man." He put his hand out. I shook it. I said, Todd. He said, good talk up there. I said, I know. My mother said, we've missed you. It's been so long and we've had a lot of time to think. And I said, I'm glad you've had time to think. A pause. The coffee machine steamed. My mother said, are you still so angry? I said, I'm not angry, Mom. I haven't been angry in a long time. She looked at me. For 1 second, something real crossed her face. Not calculation, not performance, just something honest and a little frightened. I think she understood in that second that she had expected anger and I had none left to give her, and that my calm was more complete than she had prepared for. Then it passed. The expression closed back up. She said, your father is sick, Caleb. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean that. I said, if Dad wants to talk to me, he can reach out directly. Not through Todd. Not through you, directly. I looked at Todd. I said, I don't hold what happened against you, but I need you to understand that the version of events you've been carrying is not complete. I said to my mother, I'll send you an email tonight. Then I walked back to Gerald and Priya, who had both, very deliberately, kept their backs turned. I did not slam anything. I did not shake. My hands were steady. I remember being faintly surprised by that night from my apartment on Delaney Street. I sent one email to a shared address my parents had used since 2009. The subject line was, going forward. The body was 7 sentences. I named specifically what I would not do. I would not attend family events without direct personal invitations. I would not receive messages through third parties. I would not have conversations about the past in public or in groups. I said I was willing to speak with my father directly about his health. I said I was willing to consider, in time, a limited and structured reconnection. I said it would be on my terms or not at all. I said I hoped they were well. I sent it at 9:47 p.m. Then I made tea and went to bed. I did not engineer what happened next. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I watched it the way you watch weather. Something you could see coming that arrived on its own schedule, that moved through the landscape without asking you. Barbara Teal, the woman who had messaged me in 2018, apparently had a conversation with my mother at a church function in February 2023. I don't know what was said. I know that by March, 2 people from my parents' church circle had reached out to me on LinkedIn. Both were courteous. Both were clearly asking questions my mother had not been able to answer for 5 years. My mother had built a version of my departure that made sense to the people around her. When I reappeared, publicly, professionally, with a keynote and a company and a name in an industry publication, that version developed inconsistencies. She stepped down from her position as treasurer of the Harlan Falls Community Foundation in April 2023. I do not know if these things are connected. I am not claiming they are. I am telling you what happened. Todd called me in May. Not to relay a message. He called me directly, which I noticed. He said, I've been thinking about what you said about the version of events. A long pause. I don't think I handled the Christmas thing well. I said, no, you didn't. He said, I didn't think it was my place to say anything. I said, I know, that was the problem. Another pause. He didn't apologize, not fully, but he said, I want to do better. And I actually believe that he meant it. Not because he's changed entirely. Because he sounded, for the first time in my memory, like someone paying a debt they finally understood they owed. It was too late to repair 5 years. It was not worthless. My father called in June. A brief call, 10 minutes. He said he'd been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's in 2021. He said he hadn't known how to tell me. I said I understood that. He said, I should have fixed that chair. I don't know if he meant the chair literally. I think maybe he did. I said, yeah. We were quiet for a bit. He said he'd call again sometime. I said, okay, he did call again. It was still careful. It was still partial. But he called. My mother and I have not spoken since the Hilton. She read my email. I know because the address showed as open 27 minutes after I sent it. She has not replied. That door is ajar. I don't know if she will walk through it. I do not spend time wondering about it. In September of 2023, I established a small grant, $5,000 per year, administered through a community college in Portland, for first-generation students pursuing vocational and trade certifications in logistics and supply chain management. The selection criteria favors students who are financially independent from their families. It is called the Edith A. Marsh Professional Development Grant. I named it after the woman who told me on pale blue stationery and faded ink that the leaving was not the story. I did not announce it. Priya found out through the college's website and texted me one word, good. Gerald Okafor sent a check to match the first year's funding without being asked. That is all there is to say about that. Last Thanksgiving, there were 5 people in my apartment on Delaney Street. Priya brought dal and a bottle of Trader Joe's red wine that cost $11. Gerald and his wife Margaret brought their famous jollof rice and took up more space in my kitchen than I thought was physically possible. A colleague named Sam Park brought store-brand sparkling water and a pie that had clearly been assembled under some distress. The plates didn't match. I have 4 dinner plates and they are from 3 different sets. The table is a door I bought from a salvage store on Southeast Hawthorne and mounted on 2 filing cabinets. We ate in shifts because there weren't enough chairs. At some point, Margaret said something that made Priya laugh until she had to put down her wine, and Gerald caught my eye across the table with a look that was just this. I thought about the table on Welliver Road. The good plates, the matching chairs, the wobbling one they never fixed, the careful silences, the performance of togetherness. I did not say any of this out loud. The pie was fine. If you're still listening, I want to say something directly to you. If you recognize something in this story, a table, a tilt of a head, a voice that makes itself soft before it does its work, you already know what I'm going to say. You've probably been trying to name it for years. Here are the words they use. Write them down if you need to. Ungrateful. Difficult, dramatic, too sensitive, always making everything about yourself. You always do this. Those words are not descriptions. They are instructions. They are the sound of someone trying to keep you the size that is convenient for them. They are what it sounds like when a person realizes they are losing control of a story they never had the right to tell in the first place. Here is the only thing I know to be true. You are not required to remain in any room, physical or emotional, where your presence is only welcome on terms that require you to disappear. The leaving is not the story. The story is what you build when you get out. Here is the question I want to leave you with. And it's not a complicated one, but I want you to think about the specific answer, not the automatic one. If your family called you tomorrow, after years of silence, what do you think they'd actually say? Would it be, "I'm sorry"? Or would it be, "I need something from you"? Drop it in the comments. Be honest. I read every single one. If this story reached you, if it found you at the right moment or the wrong moment or somewhere in between, there are more of them. Subscribe. Come back. I'll be here. Thank you for listening tonight. I mean that the way I mean most things. Quietly and completely. I'll see you in the next one.